They do more to bolster the depth on that offensive line, and they go and they get somebody who is, if you want to say a Brad Holmes guy, this is a Brad Holmes guy. Versatile, and I think that it's more or less what we've seen him try to do. We've also seen him go out there and balance out some of his riskier picks from an availability standpoint with some players that also have a lot of availability, and we know that Tristan Colon just last year played in 17 games and even started some at a position of need right now for the Detroit Lions. He started a couple different positions over his NFL career and adds just a little bit more depth. And this is something that, just yesterday we were talking about, where do we want to see Brad Holmes kind of go and make a move or do something to bolster? And for me, the offensive line, without a shadow of doubt, has been that unit that we've been saying that's been the strength of the team, and you got to continue to keep that as the strength of the team because of everything it means around Jared Goff, everything that it means to their trick plays and the timing, everything that it means to the run game. Obviously, I'm not saying that this signing is one that solves all of that, but it is comforting knowing that he took a step in that direction, and this type of a signing, it's not going to take away from their ability to also do something on the defensive side of the ball too, Flannel.
Yeah, and for the record, after we just a reminder to the audience, we're going to give our thoughts as a crew, and then we want to hear your thoughts on the Tristan Colon signing. And even if you want to talk about the Tigers, go ahead and call in. We really want to feature you guys prominently. JB, if you could pin this, or Ryan, if you could pin this, 313-552-6322. You can start calling in now or later. You're going to talk to Chase. He'll put you on hold. We'll get to you guys whenever we get a chance, which should be soon.
And I wanted to ask you, because I know where you were yesterday, and there were some people who were where you were. They aligned with you. Hey, look, you got to go. You got to do something along that defensive line. But a day later, we see what Brad does. I'm curious to see where you're at with this thing.
So let me be honest. And God, I missed an opportunity on this. I promise you, and my only source is, trust me, bro, that before, when I was looking at potential guys, because I went over the list of potential free agent centers, and I didn't really like any of them for the most part. But Tristan Colon, even though last year he didn't play center, he played guard, he was the only one of the listed free agent centers as of right now who actually played well last year. He was very good as a guard. He's played all over the field. He's played right guard. He's played left guard. He hasn't played center since 2021, and that's really still the one thing that concerns me a bit, is that every single person in their interior offensive line room has been primarily a guard in their career. And in the case of all the rookies and Christian Mahogany, only been a guard in their college careers. But at least Tristan Colon has some experience at center and has played well recently. So to answer your question, if there was one guy that that was on my radar a tad, it was Tristan Colon. And for whatever purpose that they want to use him in, at least it's a depth veteran presence in the interior offensive line, and at least he knows how to play center at the NFL level. It's not like he has never done it or that he doesn't know how.
But where does this, if you were talking about a little bit of concern yesterday for this offensive line, obviously a day later, I wouldn't call it necessarily a minor move. It is a depth move on an offensive line that is getting a little bit longer in the tooth and just lost some experience in Frank Ragnow. A lot of experience and a lot of talent. Where's that confidence level right now in the offensive line? Do you believe more needs to be done before the season starts, or are you still along the lines of nope, hammer away at that defensive line?
I think this was all that could be done at this moment right now on this offensive line, because he really is the only one. I promise you, if you want to dive into it, feel free. It's not very fun. That actually played well last year, who was listed as a free agent center. I know Brandon Sheriff was somebody who was mentioned who's a free agent guard. But
Mr. Henry said that yesterday.
Yeah, we're talking about free agent centers. He was the only one who played well last year. I mean, yeah, it's another veteran presence. It's another body. It's somebody who's proven that he can play guard at a decently high level on a relatively small sample size. There is a picture of him playing with the Cardinals. Left guard, right guard, been fine, pretty durable, I'd say, for the most part. And just before, because Kool-Aid, I know you were more bullish than me about augmenting this offensive line. I said yesterday how my biggest goal with the Frank Ragnow money being freed up is to maybe bolster the defensive line, maybe re-sign Z, maybe sign Jadeveon Clowney on a cheap short-term contract that basically makes up for the Frank Ragnow money and strengthens the Lions at a position where they could use maybe one more guy to kind of offset the weakening of the interior offensive line. And I still think that that's possible, but if they were going to do something, this is a move that I can co-sign. I for one, am happy with the Tristan Colon signing, especially since there's no way, and you know where, that it's going to be expensive at all. It's going to be very cheap.
This is interesting, man, because this is presenting a new aspect of what the philosophy is to continue the window of winning for the Detroit Lions. We would have liked to have seen them already push the button on the Super Bowl, which makes a lot of this type of stuff a lot easier to go through and to take. Because right now, all the risk and all the stakes are the highest that they're ever going to be until they go out there and they win this thing. Right now, they're making decisions on which players are going to be here and which players aren't, ones that we've seen be vital to winning. So to see that Brad Holmes is able to navigate that, continue to keep this culture in this room the right way, while you might lose some players, because there's going to be some sacrifices here, while still being able to bring in players that you know are going to fit, not just culture-wise, but also how they contribute. Are they going to be available? Who are these guys going to be to help coach up your young players? Because you went and you've drafted, 4 linemen in the last 2 years that you're hoping at least 2 of these guys pan out and can contribute in major ways, can be at least starter level by the end of the year. Because where you're going from here, Graham Glasgow and Taylor Decker, it's not like these guys are aging in reverse. So that's where, when I'm seeing Brad Holmes doing both sides of the ball, honestly, on a defensive line, there was some minor, moves that he made that opened up a lot more for him to be able to go and pay guys. That's where I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust in you. And I do believe that this move right here makes me a lot more comfortable with his approach to everything he's taken prior. And now it also makes me a whole lot more comfortable with like 5 picks, 5 flams on a fired up meter. I'm pick on defensive line. But Weezy D313 says that there is no defensive line that's available worth signing. So you know who he's taking the stray, the drive-by, the shots at.
And Weezy D313, you've been consistent. I'm not going to kill you for it. It's just a disagreement that we have. I do think that I would be very happy with the Lions re-signing Zadarius Smith or signing Jadeveon Clowney in free agency, but this isn't the day to talk about it. I've already laid out the reasons why yesterday. Before we pass it around to the rest of the room, and by the way, get your calls in if you feel so inclined.
And I got one more question for you too.
All right, I'll present these numbers, then you can ask the question, because I feel like I'd be remiss, because Tristan Colon, he's not a household name. If I didn't do this job, I probably wouldn't have heard of him up until yesterday, but just wanted to give you some numbers, and these are via PFF. So Ryan, if you've got the one that just says Tristan Colon on it, thank you so much. These are just numbers that he's put up. In 2020, he played 127 snaps, all at center, by the way. He had a PFF grade of 67.6, which is good, a run blocking grade of 72, which is, I think it's actually 70, but it's either 70 or 72. That's very good, and 0 sacks allowed. Not a big sample size, but still good numbers. In 2021, at 147 snaps, 115 at center, he had a 62.6 PFF grade, a 74.5 pass blocking grade. The 74.5 pass blocking grade is very good. 1 sack allowed. Those are the 2 seasons in which he played primarily at center. Small sample size, but still, it's experience. 2022, I don't count because I think he played like 49 snaps, but 2023, 322 snaps, 315 at left guard, had a 59.6 PFF grade, which isn't very good, a 69.2 pass blocking grade, which is fine, 2 sacks allowed, and then 2024, this was his best season, and how nice that it was last year. 386 snaps, 372 at right guard, 71 PFF grade, 68.5 run blocking grade, and 0 sacks allowed. And just one more on, go to the one Tristan Colon continued, if you would, Ryan, because I've got a few more that I want to present before I answer the question and pass the rock around to the guys. And this is for his career. For his career, across all positions. 559 pass block snaps, 3 sacks allowed, 6 hits allowed, 25 pressures allowed. And that right there is about the equivalent of 1 full season. And those numbers are not bad at all. Certainly for what he's going to be paid, and certainly for a guard. I would take that any day of the week. But this is spread across 5 years, just so we're fair. And in 469 career run block snaps, he had 3 seasons with a run block grade over 68, 1 over 70. Those are high grades, certainly for what he's going to make, certainly for what's going to be asked of him. And for his career, just to give the center angle, has played 257 career snaps at center. Not a ton, but it's not nothing. It's been a while, but at least he has that experience. At least he's done it at an NFL level. And as I showed you in the previous one, he did not fall flat on his face. He was perfectly serviceable.
It seems like, from an offensive line standpoint, similar move to what Brad Holmes made depth-wise and to bolster the defensive line with what he did with Lopez. So I'm not looking for Cologne to come in and be Frank Ragnow, but I am looking forward to him coming in and contributing at a high level for this team and be able to keep us in a position to where we're not seeing a depth or like a drop in the experience, a drop in overall play in terms of what the team is able to do from an execution standpoint. But my question is this: when you look at, this offensive line, obviously I'm wondering what everyone's projected offensive line would be. But when you're kind of looking at this thing, do you believe if these were always the possibilities that Frank could retire, and even that maybe Graham Glasgow is on his last leg, do you believe to this point Brad has done enough? A couple off seasons, a couple drafts, and there's some out there who believe that he didn't do enough to bolster to this point where when I'm looking at it, I believe this is just a notion of what it means to have one of those squads that you're going to have these young players that you're going to have to pay.
All right, so you can argue yes, for sure, because if we're looking at Frank Ragnow's always been a guy who's played through a lot of injuries. A lot of us suspected that his career was going to be cut short, and unfortunately it was. When they re-signed Graham Glasgow back from Denver, he was previously with the Lions, and he went to Denver, then he came back to the Lions. He was coming off of a season in which he played heavy snaps at center. So if Brad Holmes had that in mind of Graham Glasgow being somebody who could, at the very least, even with when Frank Ragnow played, be somebody who could play center and certainly spot start with Ragnow, I think that was a good move at the time. And he certainly had a really good 2023 season, and we know a lot's going to be asked of him in 2025. And as far as the draft goes, I mean, there were a couple offensive linemen in the last couple that, we were really high on and Brad Holmes didn't draft. But that's neither here nor there. The reality is we were all high on Ratledge. Brad Holmes drafted him. Miles Frazier, I thought, was a very good pick in the 5th round. Christian Mahogany had showed some promise in his first year in a couple of starts, and he was a 6th round pick. So, you can argue that he did enough, at least to keep this offensive line very, very good, with the caveat that, Frank Ragnow being lost is always going to be a little bit of it's always going to be a blow to the team. But I think I'm not going to criticize Brad Holmes for what he's done to keep this offensive line moving with Frank Ragnow retired, because Frank Ragnow retiring, it blows. I hate to be that like, it blows. He's one of the best centers in the league, but I'm not mad at Brad Holmes at all for what he did or didn't do.
I'm not mad either, because it's easy to be able to talk about this thing in just a vacuum of, well, this player was available, this player was available. It's like, no, Brad Holmes has so many different moving parts and pieces, and even other players that he's trying to keep happy. And I believe that he's actually doing a better job. Think about this. We were just sitting here wondering and hoping and making the case for please re-sign Kirby. He deserves the money. But we were all believing and knowing somebody's going to be casualties, some of these young players. But as Brad continues to move, yes, are we going to be hurt sometimes at some of the players that leave? Yeah. Are we going to, when we look at certain situations like a Zeitler, might not be hurt, but you're still like, dang, that's a blow to the offensive line? Yes. But I can tell you this, in comparison to if it was one of the guys he's already paid, and some of the guys that we now know are going to get paid, if it was one of them out the door or couldn't afford, that to me is where I would say, okay, Brad Holmes, what are you going to do? These are the ones you're investing in, and all the other parts and pieces you're bringing in are going to have to be guys that can step up, play their role, and honestly support those dogs. That's what we're seeing. He's showing that at least that's going to be his recipe, and that's why I do believe he has done enough to this point. You look at the investments he's made to the offensive line, it's clearly showing that he at least has a philosophy. They're going to be versatile guys that can play all across that line. And it was interesting that when you got a Penei Sewell in here, the first thing you asked him to do was, can you be versatile? So I'm okay with their handling of this thing. It's almost like Dan Campbell. When people talk about these coordinators, I'm like, but he selected the previous coordinators that you guys didn't really like before Dan Campbell selected them. Now we're at a position now where Brad Holmes had a large part to do with what this offensive line could be, and I do believe that he's going to do that again as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree that for the most part, I think Brad Holmes has done all that he can do. If there's one thing, and this is way in the past, I'm going to bring it up once and then I'm not going to bring it up again. If Frank Ragnow, if Brad Holmes knew that Frank Ragnow was going to retire, and I even was about this at the time, Kevin Zeitler signed with Tennessee for 1 year, $9 million. I would have given him one at 10 and tried to get him to stay. Maybe Brad Holmes did, for all we know, but I really value what a Kevin Zeitler did last year. But at the end of the day, I mean, we can say that Frank Ragnow retiring just sucks. And it's not like Brad Holmes didn't do. I mean, we've seen how much he's addressed the interior of the offensive line just in these last couple of drafts. But we also know that it might be a little bit of a rough road at first in terms of gelling in the interior of the offensive line, because Frank really made everything go. He's not going to be there anymore. It's going to be an adjustment, but at least Graham Glasgow is a veteran who has played center before. JB Smoove, Ryan's in there. I'll go to Ryan and then Justin. Ryan, Tristan Colon signing with the Lions. How are you feeling about it? Just initial thoughts.
Pro center retiring, so hopefully the fans aren't going to get on Cologne right away. Oh, he's not Ragnow, we can't replace Ragnow. And that's kind of the case. You can't replace Frank Ragnow, let's be real. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Mahogany, Ratledge, Cologne, Glasgow. Those four guys, there's going to be a lot of pressure on. We know what we have with Sewell, but I trust in the O-line coach Fraley. I think he's a solid offensive line coach. And you also can't forget here, though, that the Lions have a great offense as it is. We have weapons: Laporta, Amon-Ra, J-Mo, Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery, Goff. So there's going to be a ton of talent regardless on this offense, but I do see a lot of quick passes, a lot of slants, a lot of hitches. Not necessarily the big plays, and I know that's the exciting part, but just to give the offensive line some time, Goff to trust in everyone, I see a lot of quick plays and just not the home run balls right away.
Hey, and that's... You know what? I think that was very well said. Justin, Tristan Colon signing, is it something you're excited about? Was it a good move? Because I don't know how excited you can be about Tristan Colon, but do you think it's going to turn out to be a good move?
I think it was a necessary move, that's
Fair.
For sure. I think you needed
really
to add that depth to this rotation that is honestly an unknown. I think from left guard to right guard and center, you have a complete unknown there. You don't know who's going to start there. You don't know what the rotation's going to be. When Graham Glasgow stepped in for Frank Ragnow in the very limited time that he did, they dropped from top 5 in interior pressure allowed to the bottom third of the league. So I think that there is a pause for concern when it comes to this offensive line now without Frank Ragnow. Frank Ragnow being able to just take on nose tackles on single team assignments instead of having to have a guard help him on double teams all the time was a big deal for this offensive line. When you were able to put in Christian Mahogany in a role where all he had to do was just help Sewell and help Frank Ragnow, that's going to be completely different than what he's asked to do this year. He was just asked to make chip blocks and help them finish blocks. Now he's going to be asked to have one-on-one assignments, and that's going to be something different for him. And now I'm at the point where I'm thinking, do the Lions even have the best offensive line in the NFC North?
Oh! Hey, Justin,
Like seriously, what the Minnesota Vikings have done to their offensive line this offseason, adding Ryan Kelly, adding the rest of the pieces to their line, they may have their offensive line isn't an unknown. Ours is. Our interior 3 offensive linemen are all unknowns right now. You don't know what it's going to look like. You don't know how they're going to gel together, but you do know that the Vikings offensive line is, every single one of them is a bona fide NFL starter at their position, and a lot of them elite at their position.
But you know what?
I think that is a very, very interesting thing to think about when it comes to the Lions versus the Vikings offensive line play.
And you know what, though? This is where I believe it was very important now. Very important for the Detroit Lions to have not just retained, but did what they had to do to promote Hank Fraley. Offensive
100%.
coordinator, offensive line coordinator, and now run game coordinator too. And we know that John Morton says he's going to rely on him as it relates to building their offensive plan for this coming season. That, to me, was one of the most crucial things that this team did, even over retaining Calvin Shepard, who we knew for years was going to be the guy. On the offensive side, we continue to say, well, there's Hank Fraley, there's Tanner Engstrand. There was a couple other, there was another name and some from the outside that people had. Keeping him in-house when you are going to have so many or some questions on your offensive line, that to me was one of the most crucial things. And you're talking about strategy, because what did we see them be able to do on the defensive side of the ball when they lost everything? Those coaches came up with the plans. Those coaches came up with the strategy, and they were able to go out there and manufacture what they needed. Now you're talking about a Lions offense that cannot afford to be boxed into what intern Ryan was saying. And I can see it being that to start. Quicker passes and screens just to try and get a rhythm while the offensive line is trying to get it together, because you cannot have a golf under duress. That will spell disaster for the Detroit Lions. But for them to be their best, they are going to have to be a team that finds their rhythm to be able to play at all 3 levels of the field from an offensive standpoint. And that, to me, is where Hank Fraley is going to have to be effectively on his A game, similar to what we saw out of AG and Calvin Shepard last year, to be able to manufacture pressure. Hank Fraley is going to have to be in his bag this year, despite losing Frank Ragnow and having a couple of those other players a little bit longer in the tooth and some young guys. He's going to have to be the one now to make one of the biggest differences from a strategy standpoint to make sure this team doesn't have that dip. This offense still has to be one of the best in all of football. This offensive line still has to be the best in the North. I know, I feel the doubts that do, Justin. I get it. But they can't afford to not be. That's just the point of where we're at now. And that's why I do got a lot of confidence in Hank Fraley, who's, to this point, done a really good job.
Hey, Justin, man, coming in here and dropping bombs. Hey, you know what? I'm not mad at it, though. I understand.
It's fair.
I understand what he's saying in that regard. And Justin, I'll say this. I'm happy. I'm just happy that you're not here acting like Frank Ragnow's loss was just, next man up, we're fine. That's really what I've really
that's my big issue. And to clarify for the chat, because I just took a peek in there and I was getting killed a little bit.
Are they happy with you?
No, they're not. And that's fair. It's fine. I just think that we do need to respect the Vikings. The Vikings made significant upgrades on both their lines this season, and I think that there is a pathway for them to be better than they were last year with J.J. McCarthy. I'm not scared of them. I don't think they're a better team than the Lions. I do think the Lions still win the NFC North, but I do think that Vikings could be better than they were last year. Not record-wise, because their schedule is tougher, but in terms of them as a team, and if they could actually make some noise, I think they can. And I think they're the second best team in the division.
This is, and just to give some merit to what Justin is saying, because you went out on a limb, and I'm not mad at you for it. If we're ranking just the tackles on the teams, like the Lions and Vikings tackles, I would say Sewell 1, Darashaw 2, Brian O'Neill 3, Taylor Decker 4. I think the Lions obviously have the best one and the worst of really good tackles in terms of starting tackles in terms of the Lions and the Vikings. But I've even going back to last year, I've always had a lot of respect for Christian Darashaw and Brian O'Neill. I think Will Fries is the best guard out of both teams. I think Ryan Kelly is the best center out of both teams. I think what's really going to tip the scales is that when you look at both of their depth charts right now, which, it's obviously very fluid. It's not even training camp. You see that both O-lines have rookies on it. You see the Vikings have Donovan Jackson, and the Lions, they've got Tate Ratledge, and you know that Mahogany's young, and Miles Frazier is young, and now we got Tristan Colon. I think what could tip the scales in either team's favor is if Penei Sewell takes it up to another level and just has an alien season, which he's already had, but if he continues to have an alien season, that's going to be a factor. But let's see how the rookies on both teams play. If Donovan Jackson comes right in for the Vikings and is serviceable and turns into be very, very good, that Vikings O-line is going to be scary. But I also think, and I've been very consistent about this, that Tate Ratledge is the type of player, if you let him play guard, and I know it's going to be tougher that he doesn't have Frank Ragnow anchoring the middle, I do think Tate Ratledge is the type of talent to where he can be a day one starter and be very, very good. The point I'm trying to make is that what could tip the scales is that both teams have rookies. Let's see how the rookies play.
And another thing, too, I judge also offensive line based on what they can present as an offense overall, as well as who you're facing. And that, to me, is what matters more than anything when we are taking into consideration when you're ranking these offensive lines. Even though they're going to have to do a better job at stepping up with the loss of Frank Ragnow, I still believe that the dynamic aspect of the Detroit Lions offense, the high IQ play of a Jared Goff, being able to keep them off base anytime Jahmyr Gibbs is in the backfield, you want to be able to over pursue? You really want to be hot on that? Because then that's Jahmyr Gibbs legitimately to the house. So to me, they don't have to necessarily have as much talent or make as many one-to-one improvements as some of the other teams. They just have to make sure that what the improvements they've made can continue to keep their offense as efficient as we've seen. And we've seen them. Oh, Taylor Decker's not there for a game. Graham Glasgow's not there for a game. We've seen them play in these positions without these players, and what the offense do, though. As long as the system's in place and the players that are in position step up and do their job, we've seen them overcome. Now, the challenge this time is going to be, it's not for a game or two or three. Now you're talking about a full season of no Frank Ragnow being there. Now you're talking about a full season in which if you do now have an injury to one of, or if they miss a game to one of Graham Glasgow or Taylor Decker, that's where a little bit of my antennas of concern go up just a little bit and the Kool-Aid starts to go down. That's where you're hoping that those depth pieces, who you're already asking to play a whole lot more, can they do at all? If the Lions, knock on wood, find themselves in a position where they have to really rely on those guys, are they going to be able to run back that success on the offensive line that we saw them have on the defensive line to be able to overcome? It wasn't to the same level. We know that the healthy defensive line would have been absolutely nasty. But yeah. I do understand where Justin is coming from, and I think it is a fair point to be able to say, hey, this way, that's what kind of prompted my question about Brad Holmes. Because we know that there were some players that he could have drafted, some players maybe he could have went after in the off seasons, knowing that this offensive line has been looking at their veterans on that for a couple years. We were wondering last year if certain players are going to play. And that's where I asked the question, like, did he do enough? I do believe he did enough. And that's why I do look at Hank Fraley. But, I think Justin raised actually a really, really good question.
Basically, I think the bottom line is Brad Holmes did enough to do something that you can't actually prepare for. Like, you can do as much as you can, but you can't prepare.
That's a good way to put it.
You can't plan on replacing Frank Ragnow. You just have to do the best that you can and hope that as the season goes along, as seasons, plural, go along, because you got a young players that the guys develop and they can continue to gel, and that by the end of the season, come playoff time, the Ratledges, the Fraziers, Cologne, Graham Glasgow, they're playing at a high level because the Lions are sure